What I see when I look at Spurs is sheer blind terror. They're totally out of their comfort zone. They look like they're panicking, to be perfectly honest. They're really going to have to pick up some points because with West Ham and Forest in a bit of form, I didn't think they could go down. Now I'm starting to worry.
Chelsea go to Wrexham and give us a game that was everything an FA Cup tie should be. Arsenal's babyface 11 get the win before returning to 11th grade math class this morning. Liverpool brave out Wolves. Rubberneckers be gone. No Robert Plant tears after this one. And Port Vale Football Club, currently bottom of League One, are 3 games away from European football. It's happening! FA Cup 5th round, as majestic as Shohei Ohtani's bat flip, giving us all the energy. The Scottish Cup saves for the post-match rucks to make it all make sense. It's a joy to welcome my friend in pod, the Port Vale of words. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
Not normally good thing being the Port Vale of anything, but this weekend I'll allow it.
Want to give huge thanks to Bank of America, official bank of US soccer and the FIFA World Cup 2026 for supporting the Men in Blazers media network. Discover what's possible in sports and in life. What would you like the power to do? God, I've got to say, Port Vale, Pulitzer Prize for poetry. That is where we are in our world. And bro, I have not been able to stop thinking about something you said before we taped on Friday. You just shot a film in England about football will look like in 10 years' time. I spent the weekend at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference in Boston. I had the honour of interviewing Brentford's data-driven owner Matthew Benham. Gent rarely speaks, but he joined me on stage for a show that'll be out on Thursday. We talked about this in depth, but what I want to know is, what did you say? What did you think football will look like in a decade?
Well, to be honest with the film, Rog, I mainly concentrated on the buzzers. I think that will be the most material change. I think that in 10 years' time, football will have a lot more buzzers.
What's a buzzer?
A buzzer, as like a countdown clock going 5, 4, 3, 2, and then...
And then a player is like a huge thing jumps up from the top of the stadium and with its eye beams destroys a player that we vote on or something.
That would be ideal. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly see kind of substitutions being farmed out to digital votes. I think that will happen. No, I was cheating a little bit, to be honest, because IFAB, the shadowy body that decides on the laws of the game, they are introducing for the World Cup this summer, they're introducing countdown clocks. So the referee, in addition to all the other stuff they have to do, will have to figure out if teams are wasting too much time at throw-ins and goal kicks. And I think that in the next couple of years that will be extended to corners, to free kicks, to all set pieces. And I think the natural next step, that should just about be in place in 10 years' time, is that the countdown that the referee is currently doing in their head will be done on a giant screen, and everyone will chant down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As that's the order. And what's the natural next step after that, Rog? It's a giant sound going.
And a huge watch sponsorship. Massive
watch deals. I think in terms of everything else, we can see the direction of travel. I actually did it with Nedum and Nua.
Love Nedum.
We all love Nedum. Nedum is far too clever for his own good. He used to play for Man City and Real Salt Lake. Now a sort of respected pundit across various platforms, Rog. Nedum said before we started recording, it was a really smart way of thinking about it, that all the major technological changes in the game in the last few years have come from a big outcry about something must be done about this. So the way to tell what football will look like in 10 years' time is to think, well, what are we all complaining about constantly now? Which does give me some hope that we might get rid of VAR. Although I think more realistically, we'll just have loads more VAR.
God, I project forward, Ron. I've not stopped thinking about this. I'll tell you what Matthew Benham said in a second. But I realise right now, the driver of football is ultimately hyper-individuated fandom. And when you project that forward, I think it's only going to get more intense. Like, we fans are spending all of our time currently just totally going mad. Mostly because there's so many dribbling bits of data creeping into the world right now that prove pretty well any point we want to make, but make it feel like it's vehemently true. So we're just kind of grasping onto those data points and spunking them out into the world with seething rage. So I believe in 10 years, and I say this with complete and utter surety, I say very little with complete. This, though, I think the one communal belief we'll all share in 10 years' time is that football was so much better a decade ago. I think in 10 years' time, there'll be a million think pieces about how football was so much better in 2026 and that beautiful, inventive, collective, joyful football of Arsenal's 2025-26 champions proved to be like the high mark of English football.
Oh, there is no question that there is a world in which we are 10 years away from people sitting around in whatever AI agent-driven bar they use and saying, Arsenal played proper football, didn't they? It wasn't like this stuff you get nowadays.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, Gabriel, he just played in the spirit. It should be played with Saliba. Those corners, poetry.
I've had quite a lot of listeners get in touch, Rog, actually, about criticising Arsenal's style of play. Won't be doing that again.
It's all me from my burner accounts, to be candid. But God bless. Defend your turf, Arsenal fans. Defend your joy. That is what life is all about at the moment. Matthew Benham, by the way, I asked him about 10 years' time because of what you and I talked about. We talked about his philosophy on transfers, how he keeps finding these bloody strikers, how he finds managers. He said that in 10 years, the algorithmic models in football will be so powerful, a bit like the NFL today when there's a fourth down and immediately on the television they can tell you it's 43% chance of going for it, that TV broadcasters and essentially, he said, we owners will know all football decisions, tactical, substitutions, selections will be cast against the models, and that ultimately managers will be utterly accountable to these models in a clinical fashion, almost subservient. Essentially, what he was saying was, Raw, managers will be culture setters and really just there to do the interviews.
Yeah, but this is an interesting kind of vibe in management already, isn't it? That they have never had less power because recruitment has been outsourced to directors of football. There's loads of data analysts there that are kind of crunching the numbers. A lot of what they're doing, certainly in recruitment, and to an extent, I think even in terms of like on-pitch stuff, is decided by the data. And yet, at no point has anyone thought, maybe we should stop sacking these people quite so much. They've robbed them of most of their power, but none of the responsibility.
The important things that managers do are things we don't always see, like drink their pints of beer confidently in the hotel post-game, which we'll get to. I can't wait to watch football propelled by our new robot overlords. Quick one before we start. I will say it's been so bloody emotionally moving to spend the last 7 days launching my book, We Are the World Cup. We had an incredible time charging from Morning Joe to Pod My Take to PBS NewsHour. Yes, representing football, representing the World Cup, really, to the outside world in the United States, 100 days out from the tournament's kickoff. It has been an incredible odyssey of a journey. I think there were 3 Marriott hotels out there in the last week, which I checked into. But most of all, to see the book in your hands. All of you listeners out there, I can't tell how much I love your emails, your tweeted photos of how you're experiencing it, photos of you reading the book on the beach, at the match. I got some beautiful ones. Some of you had the terrible idea of reading it to your kids at bedtime. To learn about the World Cup memories that this book, this telling, this personal history is stirring for you. Thank you for sending them. Keep sending them to meninblazers@gmail.com. And if you've not yet snapped up a copy, please grab one today. Really helps, more than I can say, at the link in the show notes. Encourage. But let's start with a toast. I want to raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day to Tottenham Hotspur fans in a surreal week ahead in which your boys will travel to Atletico Madrid to play in the Champions League, the best, and then go to Anfield to try and stave off relegation in the Premier League, the worst. To suffer the indignity of having to watch this weekend Lincoln City fans start chanting after going top of League One. This happened, Tottenham away, ole ole. And I want to acknowledge, thanks really to the massive letters we've received this week about how excruciating it is for you Spurs fans, the experience that you are on the end of. I'll just say I've been there myself with Everton many times. But thinking about it, Everton were always expected to go down. From the very beginning of the season, we were a darkness. Spurs were not. And it makes all of this so much more surreal, almost unfathomable, like an unexpected death. And I was reading what Andros Townsend said about the Everton experience. He said this. He said it was the fans who carried the team. These are his words. He said, we were failures. We were disgraces and so small, but then to turn up to a game and have the fans greet us like we were kings made us feel so big and that we could run through a brick wall. Ultimately, it was the support and the fans at Goodison Park who lifted us out of the darkness. And I just wish that to be true for you. I know how hard it is. I know how toxic it is. I know how complicated it is. But I will be honest, I don't want Spurs to go down because of the agony it will completely evidently create for so many of you. The Harry Kane, Sonny, Dele Alli peak of Spurs coincided with the beginning of the Premier League's broadcast here in the American imagination. And so many of you love the team. I wish you all strength and health to better days ahead, starting against Liverpool, of course. Oh, Raw. I mean, I don't know if you have empathy. I don't know if there's part of you that has lots of Spursfreude. But God bless, the outcry, the pain, the agony, I can't stand it.
Yeah, I think it is that element that you picked on, Rog, is the fact that this is very much not what Spurs would have been anticipating. They were not mentally steeled for this. And one of the things I get really annoyed about with relegation is always this sense that the players think they're too good, they're too complacent, they think they're above scrapping. I've met lots and lots and lots of footballers. I don't think that's true of any of them. I think footballers are workhorses, even the ones that you think are fancy dans and kind of full of themselves. They've had to work so hard to get where they are. None of them are afraid of hard work. What I see when I look at Spurs is sheer blind terror. They are in a situation that they were not expecting, that they're not really prepared for, that they've never been in before in most cases. And unlike West Ham and even Forest to an extent, certainly Leeds and Burnley, there's no kind of, well, this is what we signed up for. We knew this would be a difficult season. They're totally out of their comfort zone. They look like they're panicking, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it would be fascinating on one level if Spurs went down to see what happens. I'm not a cruel person, so I don't particularly want it to. I don't want them to get into form against Liverpool, but I do think that there is an argument that there is a little bit of Dr. Liverpool about things at the moment. So it may be that Anfield is the right sort of place to go. It's certainly not as fearsome as it would once have been, but they've got, I think, 3 winnable home games in April. They're really going to have to pick up some points because with West Ham and Forest in a bit of form, it's starting to look. I didn't think they could go down. Now I'm starting to worry.
In Igor Tudor we trust, says no one. To the football. Wrexham 2, Chelsea 4 after extra time. What a game. One loaded before kick-off with symbolism, dreams, dose of Hollywood. Wrexham, tiny Wrexham, welcomed glamorous heavyweight opponents to the Stoke Kairas. Game that felt like a crossroads between a dingy past and a ridiculously now possible, almost touchable future. Wrexham currently in the playoff places in the Championship after back-to-back promotions. But this was also 3 years to the day. Wrexham defeated Dagenham and Redbridge in the 5th tier of English football. Saturday night, they took on the Club World Cup champions. And Raw, in a world in which football is constantly insane, financially steroided, Salt Bay tinged, this Wrexham story, which began, yes, with the Supercharger, the documentary, which gave them enough money to cut through the earlier leagues, they are now in a depth where they are outclassed by many teams financially. There is a tinge of alchemy. There is a poetic surreality to it all, isn't there?
Yeah, this is the first season in a while that they could have been cast as underdogs. They still have quite a lot of commercial income. Obviously, they've got the deals that the documentary, the profile from the documentary have enabled them to do. But they are in a league where you have, well, at least 3 clubs who got £100 million, 130 million dollars for being really bad in the Premier League last season. Like they don't have that sort of money. And even the teams without the parachute payments, Coventry and Middlesbrough have got big stadiums, they've got big fan bases. The same is true of teams like Stoke or whoever it might be. There are big beasts in the Championship. It's not quite as flat a landscape as League One or League Two. Between League One and the top of the National League, I've always thought there isn't that much difference, which is why you see quite a lot of teams bounce from League Two to League One into the Championship, because once you've got that momentum behind you, you can do it. But the Championship is a whole other level. And the only thing that you can think is that sense of spirit, of momentum, of adventure that Wrexham crafted in those promotions is still there, even though they've changed so many of the players.
Yeah, I mean, that is remarkable. It is. The earlier friends, if you're a documentary watcher, and many of you are, the earlier friends, your Elliot Lees, your Paul Mullins, your Ollie Palmers, long gone. This is a whole new set of characters. The 3 constant faces, the manager Phil Parkinson, about whom I don't think enough can be said for his calm hand, his anchoring hand on the rudder, and Ryan Reynolds and Rob Mack, who are both in attendance. I am fascinated by something they've achieved off the field that I've actually never seen before in football. I think partially because of their tone, they're self-effacing, kind of putting the town first constantly, being careful not to overstep, really careful, speaking with a humour and a humility. We've talked before a lot about how British people love to knock down everything. we've talked about how the British people prefer your failure to their own success. And other than the fan bases of the teams who they've eclipsed on the way up the ladder, which I totally understand, perhaps because it is known throughout Britain just how hard scrabble a place North Wales is, how tough Wrexham had it economically and culturally before this rise. Feels somehow Wrexham's charm has not worn thin, even in Britain, which is, to me, an incredible achievement. Is it true? And if so, why? Because to not be cut down to size is incredible.
So yeah, I think that's part of it. It's the fact that people sensed on the football side that Wrexham had had it tough. That they've been through what so many teams have been through in terms of ownership, the fans saving them, drifting down the leads. I think there is an awareness that Wrexham is a little bit of a cipher for quite a lot of post-industrial Britain. There are plenty of places that look like Wrexham, and all right, they got lucky in that Rob and Ryan decided that was the place that suited them, having considered various other places, but that hasn't triggered that much resentment, I think, because people appreciate and sympathise with what Wrexham as a place has been through. But also you have to remember, and this is a negative and a positive, we are now conditioned in Britain, as fans, to think that the best thing that can happen to you is you get a rich owner. We understand on some level that for any team to challenge the elite, it's basically a matter of winning the lottery. Have we talked about Bob Hoskins before, Rog?
We've not on this show talked about the great legend, I don't know where this is going, English actor Bob Hoskins, the English actor many of you will recognise from the 1986 film Mona Lisa. I think Hook made him massive briefly here. Also, Who Framed Roger Rabbit for you oldies. But go on, take us to the Hoskins.
Well, what Bob Hoskins is most famous for in Britain is doing the National Lottery adverts. And his voice, when they first launched the National Lottery in the 1990s...
Slightly menacing.
His voice, which was deep cockney like that. It's a little bit like Ray Winston. Yes. Although he wasn't quite as intimidating a figure as Ray Winston, obviously. He was a smaller man. But the advert was a giant finger coming out of the sky on the person who'd won the lottery and pointing at the person.
Yeah.
And Bob Hoskins going from out of nowhere, "It could be you." Which, the way I'm doing it, makes it sound like a threat.
It could be you.
But he meant it in a nice way. Like, he wasn't threatening anything evil.
Yeah.
And it feels like that with football, that is how your team can succeed in any ultimate way, is you need a giant finger out of the sky and Bob Hoskins' voice saying, "It could be you." And I think people understand that Wrexham got lucky, but rather than resenting them for getting lucky, there's an awareness that all you can do as a fan, especially as low as Wrexham were, but to be honest, right up until Newcastle or Aston Villa or Man City, you just have to wait for someone to come out and give you a massive finger from the sky.
Yeah, KSI, Dagenham and Redbridge fans, it's happening. We all just ultimately need someone to take us from just being, a boring little football club into a 360, globally attacking content platform, which is ultimately what we... Yeah, that's the dream in football, right?
It's what, when they sat in the Midland Hotel and drew up the rules to the Football League, that's what they thought. They thought, Ebenezer, we are creating a global content platform.
Yes, eventually, the world will catch up with what I'm telling you now, but remember it... remember, these are my last words. Football will soon be the world's greatest global content platform. It's all we want. It's why we watch. Look, by the way, we laugh at that, but I watched the game. I ran off stage. It's such a content. I ran off stage at Sloane with all these incredibly intense analytics people and charged to Dorchester, Massachusetts, where the Boston Reds, the local Wrexham fan club meet. By the way, at the quite incredible McGongle's, an Irish bar that has just been named. I didn't know when I went there, but it's been named one of New York Times 50 best restaurants in America. And I'll just say the spice bag is to die for. I have been to Wrexham so much. I went to Wrexham with my dad when I was a kid a lot, when Everton were away. I've obviously been a lot in the modern period. And we talked a lot in the show about how it's lifted the region economically, psychologically. What I had not encountered really till this weekend was the American manifestation. I met a man, Wayne Cram, hello Wayne, you beauty, who described himself as a die-hard Patriots fan who had never been a soccer fan until he'd seen the documentary, which is incredible. He fell in love, stay with me here. He said in the post-Tom Brady Patriots world, bit of a dip, bit of a lull, kind of created an emotional vacuum. Watched this film, became utterly hooked, started this fan club, all of them there at the pub. Now goes across to Wrexham, 3, 4, 5 times a year. It is crazy. That kind of deep from not knowing anything to being utterly all in. Every member of this fan club tell me they don't watch Premier League football, Raw. All they do is obsessively watch Championship football so they can scout Wrexham's future opponents, which is amazing. It's a level of kind of fresh, no fanaticism, the like of which I've not glimpsed before.
I had the same experience when I went to Wrexham, a few months ago now, and that was for a Championship game against Birmingham, another global content platform, and you're kind of wandering around outside the Stoke Terrace, and what you hear is American voices, people who have very obviously come on holiday to Britain, and this is not something that used to happen, Rog. You will be aware of this, but perhaps listeners won't be. It was very unusual for Americans to include in their itineraries of this glorious island a visit to Wrexham. That was not a thing that happened, ever. No one ever said. I'm not sure anyone had ever been on holiday to Wrexham. That's not a thing that is possible.
It's true.
Like, you, as a British person, you would never be like, oh, we might just have a weekend in Wrexham, to be honest. But people have bonded to the show and to the team in such a way. This is a debate I've had with a lot of my friends over the weekend, that I think the show has been the gateway to the team. And in my mind, what's basically happened is these people have been exposed to the magic of football in the same way that you were when you were a child, or I was when I was a child. They needed a different gateway to it. We got ours through, your dad telling you to support Everton, or my half-sister telling me to support Liverpool, or my dad putting football on the TV and saying, this is the World Cup, enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'll see you at the end of the month.
I got mine by going to a game with my dad and have the singular joy of having someone roll up a programme and then urinate on the back of my leg behind. That was, I'm not knowing who it was. I was like, yes, I'm in!
This is very much a warm and slightly moist place, and I want to come here again. But all that's happened, and I think there is a little bit of there's a cultural disconnect that people struggle with a little bit over here, is that the TV show has enabled those people, it's opened up that magic of football. It's still the football that gets you to an audience that would normally have been put off because they thought they weren't into sports, or because it wasn't a sport they'd been exposed to. What has happened is they've opened a doorway that enables you to see the wonder of sports. And it doesn't matter to me how you come to it, it's that you come to it.
I could not agree more. I can't tell you how much knowledge there was in that room. There was also a lot of North Walians who happened to be in Boston who were there. And honestly, you could not tell a difference in terms of the intensity, the passion, sense of connection. And for me personally, I want to add, I'm going to get to the football right now, but it was so bloody fun to watch this game. As opposed to watching Everton, which I think it matters almost too much. It is utterly excruciating. I felt so emotionally connected to this game. There was just an effervescence, a pure fan wonder. I watched this game with a naive wonder. It was really beautiful.
But that to me has always been part of the FA Cup, where you, even if you take away the kind of the connection that people have built to Wrexham or whatever over the last few years because of the show, the specific Wrexham context, I think an FA Cup shock, or the potential for an FA Cup giant killing, appeals to everyone because it is all of the reward and none of the risk. Because ultimately, if the team loses, you don't care. It doesn't hurt you. If the team that happens to be playing the Premier League giant loses, fine, it's not your team, it doesn't really hurt. But if they win, it's amazing.
Oh, as Whitney Houston sang, didn't we almost have it all? To the game, the noise of the Stoke Kairas, cut from pure shared collective dreams. 80 minutes in, they were rewarded. The ball driven downfield. Sam Smith, 28-year-old forward, ground the hard yards through the leagues after emerging from the Manchester United academy. Chased onto it. Flummoxed, the quite panicked Robert Sanchez, and reeled away deliriously with surprise and ecstasy. Raw. In that moment, someone turned to me and said, "Oh my God, if only there was a documentary to capture these kind of moments."
It must be a challenge for them, though, because they only have certain numbers of episodes, don't they, per season? And this does feel like the high point of Wrexham's season, the taking the lead against mighty Chelsea. But it might not be. It might yet be a footnote. And that is, purely as a kind of global content creation logistical issue, that is a problem.
You know what? We're going to change the name of this podcast to Today in Global Football Platforms. And because at the end of the day, football doesn't allow for romance, which is what you're hinting at. 40th minute, I think it was Chelsea's second shot of the game. Garnacho had a shot cleared off the line by George Thomason, but the ball smacked off poor Arthur Okonkwo. You will remember him as the goalkeeping hero of Wrexham's shootout victory. He came on our show right after Wrexham defeated Nottingham Forest in the last round. He is such a humble warrior. I adore Arthur. Another Arsenal Academy product. Truly nothing he could do about it. It ricocheted off his back. And what I admired was how tenacious Wrexham were. They didn't wilt. George Dobson's got to be said, pulsating in midfield. Another Arsenal Academy youth product, audacious, at the heart of all that was good. Game was open, it crackled. Again, Phil Parkinson, I love this man. I've come to know him quite well. Wrexham manager. I loved how he kept refreshing in this one. In a way he doesn't always in the league. Kept throwing on attacking pieces, substitute after substitute. It was really fortune favours the bold, and it was rewarded. 78th minute, corner, flicked home by defender, Manchester City Academy graduate Callum Doyle. This moment was beautiful. It felt like human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together. It was mass hysteria, Rook.
Yeah, and at that point there was a nostalgic flicker, because Wrexham in the pre-Reynolds Mac era produced one of the just have your normal surname, for crying out loud.
No, do what you want nowadays when you're a global football platform.
I might rebrand as Rory Smith.
Yeah.
You could be Rog Ben.
Yeah.
Wrexham were famous. One of the kind of the high points of Wrexham's history was an FA Cup shock against Arsenal in 1992 when they won 2-1. And on the TV coverage, it was really interesting to me that they kept cutting in the reaction shots to that goal from Rob and Ryan in the owner's box to Mickey Thomas, who scored the first goal in that win. He didn't score the second one. The guy who scored the second one, I think, has been forgotten, but he was the central figure in that win. Mickey Thomas. He's a big kind of character.
Icon. Went on to become a United star.
Yeah, not just he's not just a Wrexham icon. He's kind of he's one of those kind of older footballers who kind of belongs to us all now, Mickey Thomas. And it was that kind of
He's all of our dads.
He's your uncle. Do you know what I mean? He's just the country's uncle is Mickey Thomas. But it was a really nice kind of distillation of the two sides of Wrexham, that it's this modern, quite glamorous, very sexy, kind of amazing story centered on these two Hollywood actors, but it's also got Mickey Thomas in it, and that was what Wrexham were. And at that moment when they went 2-1 up, you did think, okay, actually this is on, and the context has changed completely. Like, the circumstances of this are totally different, but the outcome might well be the same.
God bless. I thought you were going to say the camera's cut. I didn't think about Mickey Thomas. I think about the shots in that moment to Liam Rossigna, who just like a human gulp on the Chelsea sideline. I thought that hotel beer is going to be severely lacking in aura tonight as he frantically sought answers deep into his Microsoft Surface, and whatever was on it, he found it 4 minutes later. It was quite agonising. Josh Acheampong, quite brilliant in clinical action, ruthlessly seizing on a moment of indecision in that Wrexham backline. Muscled Thomason off the ball, smashed home high. Truly a deflating moment that felt like McGonagall's, like having to watch one you love suffer in pain. There can be no dreams in football, Rook.
No, but you still have that sense, don't you, at 2-2? Okay, they've done it. They've taken the lead twice. Chelsea have fought back twice, and look, what it will have said on Liam Rossigna's Microsoft Surface would have been, have a squad that costs a lot more than your opponents. That was the secret to that. For all the quality that Chelsea had on the pitch at that stage, you still wonder, do they get one more chance?
God bless. I mean, Wrexham, I felt they played their faces off. They survived a thunderous shot from Pedro Neto that crashed off the bar, but on the stroke of the final whistle, just before the game went to extra time, tired legs, shattered minds, Garnacho drove through the Wrexham gut and was side down by, I think in the olden days we'd call it a reducer, from George Dobson. An agony that it was him, really. An attempt to stop the break, a little overzealous. Took out the man a little too high, a little too out of control, according to VAR. By the way, Phil Parkinson has managed over 1,000 games, crossed 7 teams. Incredibly, this kind of tells you about the rise. That's Stoic Wonder. This was his first ever experience of VAR. Spent the whole time in the lower leagues. VAR
is that right?
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? I don't think he likes it too much, or mostly because VAR is pragmatic. VAR is unromantic. VAR's a dream killer.
It is, but VAR's also an interfering kind of busybody, and that was almost the platonic ideal of a foul that is both a yellow card and a red card, and both decisions are correct. So the fact that they went across and re-refereed it is, I think, to a lot of people, kind of what's wrong with VAR. You could have just left it as a yellow. It wasn't an absurd punishment for that tackle. Just as if the referee had shown an initial red, that wouldn't have been an absurd punishment for the tackle either.
Yeah. So why re-decision it? There was this is where football is, and I kind of loved it. After the game, Rob Mack said something about VAR and what he thought about it, and Noah Khan put out an Instagram post with Rob Mack's words about VAR, very, very kind of tactically explaining exactly why it was a red card. Noah being a huge Chelsea fan, and I love it. This is where we are, football in 2026. But we also are where football's always been, as a cruel lover. Garnacho, the man fouled, was the menace who scored the winner from close range. At last, Rolo wrote, quite unkindly in the Men in Blazers Discord, "This is Alejandro Garnacho. Talks like Ibrahimovic, walks like Neymar, ego of Ronaldo, the finishing of Darwin Núñez." I don't think any of that's particularly kind. There's a lot in there that we're not going to be able to unpack. We'll save it for another show today in Alejandro Garnacho. Had to be him though, Ro.
It did, yeah. That's the other thing the FA Cup does. It likes to round off its storylines. But at the same time, Alejandro Garnacho, who is a fringe player really at Chelsea, or a squad player, say, cost, £49 million, $60 million. That is the level of talent that you're talking about. So even though Wrexham are not the plucky underdogs that you might imagine them to be because of the investment that's gone in, what they're playing when they play Chelsea is an order of magnitude greater than anything they can muster. So in a way, it kind of highlights just how well they've done to take them to extra time.
Yeah, God bless 10 men Wrexham thought they'd even summoned an equaliser when Lewis Brunt headed home some corner chaos. But after the stadium exploded, with a noise I do believe was audible, in outer space, VAR again stepped in and ruled he was offside just again. Wrexham felt hard done to. But again, the VAR thing has no feelings. Probably something that they're going to have to get used to if they do knife fight their way through the playoffs raw. But it still felt heartbreaking. João Pedro turned the knife, killed off the game, 6 goals, 1 assist, last 5 games for the Chelsea striker. By the way, do a quick word on him. Liam Rosenior, almost like that gent's personal hype man. He was asked if João Pedro was in the same bracket as the likes of Kane, Mbappe, Haaland. He said, for me, João is in that category now. I do believe he's right if we talked about the last 5 games raw. But there is a thing called consistency that we got to see, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slightly unfair question of Liam Rosenior. I don't want to criticise the journalist who asked it, but your manager can only say one thing. I suppose he could maybe have said he's got to work to get to that level. That's the talent he has. He could get that far.
Well but done, Ro. By the way, in a post-models world, you could now be a manager. That's the line.
But at the same time, if you want to kind of build on the confidence your player has, you maybe want to say, yeah, look, he is just that good. But I mean, obviously he's not. He's obviously not as devastating as Erling Haaland. He's obviously not got the career of Harry Kane. That goes without saying. So Rosenior maybe could have tempered it a little bit better. But ultimately, I think there's only certain things that a manager can say in that situation. I'd be staggered if he means it.
I think Liam got some credit for not just blurting out the first thing that came to his brain, which was, no, he's not. He's better than them all.
It might have been. He resisted it.
Yeah, he resisted it, so he just went 1 down instead of going 2 down. Find that third gear. For Chelsea, survive, advance, and breathe. Liam Rosenior will not have loved that he had to make 6 substitutions to do this job before they have to travel to Paris Saint-Germain this Wednesday night in the Champions League. What can we actually take from this, though, Ro? Because looking at the Chelsea fan post-mortems, there's a lot of heat, I'd say, that a lot of the squad players are not fit for Chelsea purpose, just not at the Chelsea level.
Well, if only they had a club that would regularly trade 10 to 15 of them every summer and get some new ones in. Yeah, I mean, if you make a lot of changes to a team, if you bring in a load of players who have been on the fringes, then what you lose is coherence. That is just a universal truth of football. That kind of, those bonds that build up with repeated practice aren't there, so the team doesn't look as convincing. And the other thing I'd say is that I think in games like this, the giant, in inverted commas, you can't win, really. Because if you win heavily, then everyone says, well, they're a championship team, they're rubbish, you should win heavily. If you win narrowly, it's, well, you should be doing better than that against a championship team. And if you lose, obviously, it's hugely embarrassing. But in reality, they went to a very difficult place, a team that's got a lot of momentum, a lot of form behind them, has a good championship level squad, and they got through. And that is ultimately all you can ask of them.
Come to Everton on loan, Mr. Liam Delap. As for the Wrexham, what was amazing, final whistle, there was not sorrow. A little bit like the Chicago Bears when they got beaten by the Rams in the playoffs. It was a very eerie moment. It was not a sadness. It was a sense of valiance, sense of defeat, yes, but defeat against the Club World Cup champions who were stretched and were left feeling that they'd laid bruises on that team as they left North Wales. A tremendous pride almost. And I do believe a marker that the ultimate dream, the crazy dream, is ultimately touchable. But Raw, beneath all of that, the league is what matters. Tuesday, that's the important one against Hull. Then Friday against Swansea, right? Yeah,
well, that is the thing that will drive Wrexham to the ultimate kind of pinnacle of their journey, which is getting to the Premier League. That this has been a great subplot in the FA Cup. You know, to get through to the fifth round, to get Chelsea to take it so far, to compete so well. But ultimately, the crescendo to the season will be, can they get promoted to the Premier League? And that is where their minds will have to drift. But this was not, I agree with you completely, it wasn't a kind of chastening experience for them. It should really have whetted their appetite that they can compete. Because ultimately, it wasn't Chelsea's strongest team, admittedly, but Chelsea aren't the weakest team in the Premier League. Chelsea are fifth. You know, that is, you have given a very good team, one of the most expensive ever assembled, a really good game, and that should really encourage you.
And I mean this sincerely, as a footnote on this. Wrexham, they're good for the heart.
There's an awful lot about modern football that can be quite dispiriting, but Wrexham isn't one of those things. I think as a kind of palliative, it's quite useful.
Talking about good for the heart, yours, not mine. Wolves 1, Liverpool 3. Not to go all Shakespeare on, but we came to bury Liverpool, not to praise them. Speak neutral, objective outsiders. This game, really more than an FA Cup fifth round rumble. We'll get to the big picture question of whether winning the FA Cup bauble will be enough to redeem a season of slop and fecklessness for Arne Slot. But the prospect of his defending champions going to bottom feeder Wolves twice in 3 days and losing both, Raw, that was a humiliation on par with being beaten up by Millhouse in The Simpsons. Simply couldn't be countenanced, right, Raw?
Yeah, I went into this full of dread, Roger. In fact, the best way I can sum up how Liverpool fans, I think, felt about this game was I said to my son, "Do you want to stay up and watch it?" And he said, "No, I don't want to watch them lose to Wolves again. Can we watch some Ben Fogle instead?"
Oh, bless. His little heart couldn't take it.
No, too disappointed.
Oh, my God. When Everton were really in their low, this is even before like the relegation dodging of the past couple of seasons. I'm talking like, early 2000s when we were just adrift, completely new era of bankruptcy. My children who loved Everton, all they wore was Everton jerseys to school when they were 5, 4, 6. They couldn't watch the games with me. I didn't realise at the time, they found it too excruciating to watch me so upset and so angry watching something on a regular basis, which is just, they both loved it and could not stand it. So there you are, tiny little glimmer of that. It's good for your kids. But despite the Champions League Tuesday, the Galatasaray rumble to come, Arne Slot had to start a strong side here, even flung in Alisson when this could have been a Marmashvili joint. But the first half, if you dared watch it raw, it was lethargic, it was low intensity, it was low cardio. At the same time, you had Luis Diaz bringing up 20 goals to add to his 16 assists in his first year at Bayern Munich. The cutting edge was blunt. Really a first-half performance of all the excitement of a McDonald's CEO eating the new Archburger. We are over 30 games into the season. It's still hard to try and understand what this identity is, what Liverpool are trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue with them. It's the biggest issue that Slot has in terms of the future as well, is that it's not just that results have been inconsistent. I think they're now on 3 defeats in 24 games or something. It's not been... The worst of the crisis was kind of November, early December. The problem is that I'm not sure anyone can really see what it is everyone's waiting for. What's the thing that comes at the end of it that makes all this worthwhile? I think fans generally will give you time and space if you can sell them on the idea that there's that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I'm not sure Liverpool fans know what that looks like at this stage, and that's a real issue for Slot.
There is no rainbow. 6 minutes into the second half, though, redemption came from two old Liverpool hands. Both joined the club back in days of yore. Was it 2017? Been a focus of and stars of perhaps the club's greatest nights in the modern period. First up, Andy Robertson. Rare start. Rare goal, started the counter by blocking a cross at one end, then legged it up the other end to unleash on the ball. His celebration, fascinating, really a furious little roar. It's like seeing a lion in winter relive the heart, the fight, the tenacity personified that he'd really embodied at his peak.
Yeah, by this stage I was watching because I had sent my son to bed. So it felt very much like one of those bolts from the blue that Liverpool have lacked this season and have needed so much. Just that kind of decent move, looks like it's broken down, player realises they're in a pocket of space and catches the ball incredibly sweetly. Robertson himself said afterwards he doesn't hit many quite that well. But it seemed to break something in Liverpool. It seemed to kind of remind them, oh yeah, that's what we're meant to be doing. And that it was him who has never been Liverpool's best player, but for a long time he has kind of been the heartbeat of the team. He kind of embodied the style of Liverpool under Klopp, particularly. It felt suitable and fitting that he was the one who kind of reminded everyone this is the general idea.
Yeah, I think perhaps the greatest tribute I can give Andy Robertson is as an Everton fan. Andy's given us so many truly awful memories. But even though deep down I do admire him, I also love that Alisson calls him Robertson Carlos. And it was Robertson Carlos who set up Mo Salah, whose goal on Tuesday had been his first in the league since November. This one, his 254th in a Liverpool jersey. A goal low met by a relief, an exhale, the sense that the game was safe, and it felt surreal. Curtis Jones added a third. God bless, becoming an FA Cup goal-scoring specialist. Slot said post-game, reflecting on the difference between the two performances, comparing it to the self-soiling on Tuesday night, he said, of course it's the perfect response when you look at the result, but every stat is exactly the same as 3 days ago. There are a lot of similarities between this game and 3 days ago. Was he right, Raw? Or what was different this time?
No, I think he was right, but he's not right in the way that he thinks, because the issue with Liverpool this season hasn't really been the stats. In most games when Slot has said, you know, they had more shots, or they had more chances, or they had more possession, or they had more kind of dangerous passages of play, he's been completely right. Like Liverpool, in most of objective ways, do dominate most games that they play. But at no point in any of them have they looked like they're a threat. They've never carried any real edge. Or very rarely have they carried any real edge. And I think the difference on Friday night compared to Tuesday night was they had a couple of chances and they took them. And then obviously that goals change games. You know, the scoreboard is against Wolves. Wolves have to come out a little bit more. That means Liverpool can try and pick them off on the break. They do that. They get the third. All of a sudden it feels easy. And he's right to say that on Tuesday night, I can't remember what the stat was on Tuesday night, but certainly by half-time, possibly after an hour, Wolves had an XG of 0.00, and Liverpool had something like 17 shots. But their XG wasn't a huge amount better, to be perfectly honest, because they're playing so slowly with so little purpose, they carry so little threat, they don't really seem to have a great idea of how they're going to score.
That's it.
And ultimately, a lot of that was true on Friday night as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a Liverpool fan, which is an abhorrent couple of words, I think I'd be elated to see 70-year-old Rio as a difference maker. His willingness to use the ball aggressively. You're talking about creating. He created fearlessly. Also, great to see Florian Wirtz back as a second-half sub, back from injury. You think about what he and Ekitike provide. That duo have been compared by many Liverpool fans in my life to the Instagram toothpaste that make your teeth look whiter within just 30 minutes without either of them on the pitch. Just feels like such a slog to watch Slot ball, which brings up the question, Slot, it's got to be said, has worn out his welcome in terms of many of the factions of the Liverpool fan base. This season of languid football will do that for a crowd who've become really accustomed to a swagger. If Arne Slot wins the FA Cup, Raw, is that enough? It's a tchotchke, but it is still a vaunted bauble for other fan bases. I'd bite your arm off for it. Is that enough to have won in 2 seasons the league and the FA Cup? Will that, in your mind, let him hold on to his job?
Oh, so I think there's 2 different questions there. I may be quite old-fashioned, but my sense of Liverpool and the FA Cup is they haven't won it enough. And that it's something that every season, I think, there's a risk the club will look at it and think, oh, it's not that important, let's focus on other things. And I'd really like them to win the FA Cup. Like, it's cool when Liverpool win the FA Cup. It does matter. It's not the lead, it's not the Champions League, but it matters to me as a fan. And I think that's true of a lot of fans. So yeah, if they were to go on and win it, and look, there's still some big teams left in the pot. It's not all Port Vale, Rog. So it's still a big if. If they went on to win it, it would make this season a qualified success, I think, depending a little bit on where they finish in the league. If they finish 5th, get Champions League and win the FA Cup, that's fine for me. I'm not greedy. That's a good season. If they finish 6th, don't get in the Champions League and win the FA Cup, that's more of a question mark. But I don't actually know if it's relevant to him keeping his job. And I go back and forth on Slot a lot, as I think listeners might be able to tell. And it's not really related to results. It's that thing that we were talking about. I don't know what Liverpool being good next season looks like based on the Liverpool I've seen this season. And that's a real issue. And I think that is what the hierarchy at Liverpool have to consider. It's what Slot has to consider. It's what the fans have to consider. Because ultimately there hasn't been enough excitement. There's not been enough purpose in their play this season. They have looked lost and kind of just bereft of ideas for so much of the season. He won the title last year, so fans will kind of tolerate that for this year because fans ultimately aren't stupid, they're not ungrateful. But if you go into the start of next season just with the memory of 25-26, as soon as they have a bad result, everyone will turn, and that is unsustainable.
And talking about winning things, Mansfield Town 1, Arsenal 2. A cavernous 58 league positions separated the third tier Stags, 16th in League One, and your Premier League quadruple chasers, Arsenal Football Club. Yes, Mansfield have beaten Burnley in the last round to reach the lofty heights of the 5th round for the first time in 51 years. Mansfield... What's a Mansfield? It's a historic market town. It's 12 miles to the north of Nottingham. It's on the border of Sherwood Forest, which makes it sound amazing raw. In fact, it calls itself the gateway to Robin Hood country. English geography is far more accessible to the American mind when it is linked to Disney movies. Slightly less romantically, 2022, Mansfield was named one of Britain's most miserable places to live after a government survey. I don't know why the government survey that and why they would then release those findings. It's doing a bit of a dirty to Mansfield Raw. Well done, government. Have you been there, Raw? Can you describe what this part of the East Midlands is like for us?
I've not been to Mansfield the town. I've been to the East Midlands a lot and to the kind of the countryside around Mansfield. It's old mining country. It's part of post-industrial Britain. To be honest, it's not massively dissimilar to North Wales in that sense. It lost a lot of its identity, a lot of its kind of wealth when the pit shut in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. We can do a little bit of British social history if you want.
Painful social history.
Margaret Thatcher's role in it, but it's a part of the country that is very proud. Is very rarely depicted in any form of media. You never hear much about the East Midlands. It has a really specific accent that no actor can do, which is a point. My dad is from the East Midlands, and it's a big thing for him, is that people group it in either with the North or with Birmingham, which is the West Midlands. The East Midlands is a whole other thing, and we don't really appreciate that.
Not even Mirren, not even Helen Mirren.
I don't want to say it's beyond Helen Mirren. Does what is beyond Helen Mirren, Rog? Nothing's beyond Helen Mirren. But no, he gets very annoyed about it because you'll get dramas set in like Nottingham, and they will all be talking Mancunian. He doesn't like it.
That's so interesting. I'd love to see Helen Mirren do Cole Palmer, by the way, but I don't want to get off on that. Helen Mirren's Cole Palmer will be chef's kiss. God bless to the football. And Arsenal incredibly started two young sensations, Max Dowman, Marley Salmon. We're making Arsenal the first ever Premier League team to start a competitive game with two kids 16 or under in any competition. Dowman making his first senior appearance since November after recovering from injury. He was fearless, had a chance in the 4th minute. Goalkeeper Liam Roberts played it straight to his feet. He charged in, feeling dangerous, but was smothered by a trailing leg from the keeper. Failed, it's got to be said, Cabbage Patchy-esque. Stadium compact. quite beautifully at the end of the Mansfield Tunnel. Let's have a quote by the legendary Arsenal coach Arsene Wenger: "If you don't believe you can do it, then you have no chance at all." And credit Mansfield, they did have belief, Raw. They did attack in flurries. They got in behind. They actually caused some League One chaos. They had 7 shots in the first 20 minutes. Unbelievably, more than any team in any competition against the Arsenal this season.
But I guess that's partly because, again, you're playing a team that's slightly less familiar with each other than even with Arsenal's massive squad and the endless rotation that Arteta can do. There's a little bit of uncertainty. But even is the fact that the stadium's a little bit worse. The changing rooms are a bit smaller. The pitch is difficult. All of it just puts the Premier League teams off. And that does have an impact. And that's why there's a history of FA Cup giant killings. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, no, there's a real beautiful storyline to this one. Mansfield are managed by Nigel Clough, former Nottingham Forest star, son of godfather of English football management, Brian Clough. A bit like if Vince Lombardi had a son. He said, quote, "Arsenal are slightly technically better than us, but we'll try and play our normal game." He said it's a difficult surface, this. And credit the Stags, they made it through the first half hour, thanks to Arsenal miscalibration, a Trossard injury, and Kepa chill. Then the breakthrough, 41 minutes, which came almost as a relief rather than a typical orgasm of a goal. The goalkeeper, Roberts, parried a shot from Madueke out wide. Martinelli picked it up and found Madueke again and just left foot, edge of the area, got his foot round it, actually pointed where he wanted it to demand it, and then just lashed on it as if he crushed it with a 3-wood. Taking Madueke, a couple of shots, let's just say, to calibrate and create Arsenal's 100th goal of the season. Shane, in the Men in Blazers Discord, wrote, "I've always thought Madueke is one of those players who plays as if he's better than we can all see he is, and every now and again, he's as good as he thinks he is."
Is that fair or unfair? It might be unfair. I think Madueke's been really good for Arsenal.
I think so too.
I'm not sure that yeah, I mean, he does have a little bit of a swagger, but that's a positive as a footballer. You want to have that. You know, his job is to replace Bukayo Saka in the team. You need to have a bit of self-belief.
By the way, it reminds me of Eden Dzeko, who English journalists used to agonise over whether he was an average footballer who had truly brilliant moments or a brilliant footballer who had lots of average moments, which is an agonising defeat. Aren't we all, in a way? By the way, it looked less than controlling, less than domination. Mansfield pressed high, urged on by the crowd. Intensity never wavered. In the 50th minute, this lowly team, they hadn't buckled, they hadn't shown quarter, and they gained their reward. Ultimately, their memory. Will Evans pounced on a hospital pass from young Salmon to Mosquera, and the 28-year-old journeyman striker who spent much of his career moonlighting, this is true, as a farmhand to support himself in football. Gent had just come on as a half-time sub. God bless, for milking cows to scoring the goals. He turned Mosquera inside out, went across the goalkeeper. Just a moment of true excellence, Raw. On one level, I thought, wow, his whole life is built up to that moment. And in the future, he'll always be the man who scored against the Arsenal. But the quality of the finish, Raw, is a reminder of something you always say, the profound talent that exists at every single level of the game.
Yeah, none of these are bad footballers. They are all excellent footballers, whether you've heard of them or not, whether they're playing for Mansfield or not, whether their careers have worked out as they might once have imagined or not. They are all outstanding footballers. And I guess the difference is the consistency with which they can produce those moments. But Mansfield have scored some absolutely brilliant goals in this FA Cup season. They scored the free kick that took them through against Burnley was of the highest quality. And it is, yeah, like you say, it's a reminder that what you're watching are some of the very finest athletes in the world against some of the very finest athletes in Europe. And there is a difference, don't get me wrong, but it's not a massive one.
Also countered by Senyon Eze, who's ultimately synonymous with FA Cup glory, and within the blink of an eye, Norgard, Fed Ebbs on the end of the area, and he street-balled his way past the defenders, just lashed it, smashed it, battered it. Glory to God, glory to Eze. 8th goal for the Arsenal. This one, yeah, in our interview with him, which you can find on our YouTube, he talked about cage decisions, kind of flow state goal that he scored a lot as a kid playing on basketball courts. This was the cage decision. He lives to singe the Spurs, and he lives to turn it on in the FA Cup. 5 goals, 3 assists in the competition since the start of last season, including this banger. Is Eberechi Eze in the FA Cup like the Ark of the Covenant?
He does seem to quite enjoy it. Yeah, I guess that there's a fairly obvious reason for that, isn't there? That he's he's got a lot of good memories in this tournament. So why would he not want to save his best for it? But at the same time, that's not a bad thing for Arsenal, is it? Having a single FA Cup specialist who can kind of win the tournament for you, that's quite a useful little thing to have in your back pocket.
Spurs specialist tick, FA Cup specialist tick. This game is getting ever more hyper-specialised. By the way, an Arsenal fan I watched on the TV, in that moment when Ebb scored, waved goodbye at the Mansfield fans, which I thought was a little bit harsh.
Slightly unfair,
yeah, that was it. Mansfield, courageous, noble. They exit heads held high. Ultimately, two brilliant finishes. Difference between these two teams. I think the fans, the owners of Mansfield will be able to tell their kids and their grandkids about the day the best team in Europe came to town and felt the Mansfield breath on their collars. That is beautiful, by the way.
It's really nice. It's the fact that, even if it was only for a few minutes, they were level. And that's what matters, is that Mansfield lost that game and they're out of the FA Cup, but I think they will all, the players, the club, the team, whoever it might be, they'll all have proved a point to themselves. There is a victory in there somewhere.
I love it all. These stories will get, and should be, get bigger with every telling. Arteta, by the way, interestingly, breathless about Max Dowman. Even he couldn't hold it in. Max was exceptional when the ball's bouncing all over the place on an uneven pitch. You have people on your back, the way he handles time and space and the touches that he takes. It's just incredible. That's high praise for Mikel, who often plays stuff down. Kind of wild and wonderful, to be candid. If I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be salivating. Arsenal, though, through to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Quadruple still on. Raw, quickly, how many of the four, League, Carabao, FA Cup and possibly the Champions League, will Arsenal win?
2.
Can I push you on this? Which? Is it a Carabao and FA Cup double? Is that what you're hinting?
Premier League and Carabao, I think. I mean, look, I think they'll make the Champions League final, if that helps. Does that help?
Yeah.
Just their side of the draw is not easy, just the Champions League, but it's favourable.
Okay,
but
Spurs.
I think Tottenham will have too much for them in the final.
That'd be amazing. Oh my God.
No, Spurs would be the semi-final, wouldn't it? Spurs are on their side of the draw.
Yeah.
No, but you look at one of PSG, City, Real, and Bayern Munich are coming their way in the final.
Woo!
That, I think, at the end of a long season, that might be too much. I think they'll win the league. They should be really proud of themselves for winning the league and one of the domestic cups. I'm not sure both.
I agree with you utterly. I think Arsenal do the double, though the league is the sun and the moon, the everything for every Arsenal fan. And they Leverkusen await midweek in the Champions League, then Everton Football Club at the weekend. Let's go to the Hunters, kind of. Newcastle 1. Manchester City 3. Your casual 5th clash of the season between these two teams. Obviously, they played in the Carabao semi-final, won by City. They had a split in the league games. Both clubs preoccupied with the Champions League games against Barcelona for Newcastle on Tuesday. City taking on their regular boos, Real Madrid, on Wednesday. And in the effort to combat tired legs, lots of changes here. Pep made 10. Erling Haaland wasn't even in the squad. He was left to focus on growing out his beard hairs. Eddie Howe rang in 4 changes. No matter how rotated the squads were, every single song Newcastle played pre-game just feels like a ballad of war. My God. And Newcastle responded from the off, absolutely pinged City in the early exchanges. Harvey Barnes made it 1-0, 13th goal all comps this season. But in the 39th minute, Jeremy Doku drove into the heart of the Newcastle defence, hit one, this is incredible, low across the 6-yard box, found its way through a thicket of legs, and then Savinho just stood there and let it bounce in off his legs. An incredibly bizarre looking goal. You don't see it very often. Savinho less an attacker, more a human Brazilian backboard. The commentator said in the time, he said, Savinho didn't even swing his legs because he knew if he did, he'd miss, which is a bit harsh.
Mean.
Mean, but he's just calling it as he sees it. Did Savinho mean it, Raw? Because if he did, it's footballing galaxy brain.
That's a good question. I don't think he can have done, because I think your instinct in that situation as a footballer is always to try and move your leg to redirect the ball. I think it maybe just hit him. But sometimes that's the right thing to do, Roger. Sometimes the right thing to do is to do nothing.
I think he did mean it. By the way, the instincts of some footballers, Sienna Barry, would be to get his arse into place, to arse it in.
But it's a particularly effective arse.
Better would try and shoulder it in. So they're different horses, different courses. I think he did mean it, because if you see, he actually flexes slightly his leg into position. But whatever happened, it lit the fuse on the Pep bomb. City flooded forward in numbers from that point on. Poor Newcastle just wilted. Omar Marmoush scored twice. Gent loves haunting the tune. 14 goals he scored for City, and 7 of them came against Newcastle. It's like Egyptian Eze when facing the Spurs. Other headline coming out of this one, early second half sideline. Pep Gasm, after a perceived Trippier foul on Doku that earned Guardiola a yellow card, his 6th of the season. Thanks to new rules introduced this campaign, 6 yellows means a 2-match touchline ban. Pep said post-game, "We have the manager with the record for the most yellow cards. I'm so proud of that. I always wanted a new record, and now I have it. 2 games banned now. I will go on holiday, and the team will continue." Raw, he then jawed with the third official, and then TNT asked him after the third goal what he said to the official. He said, I'm sorry for how good we are playing. Raw, I watch Pep this season, and I admire so much about him, I really do. It is amazing to witness, though, when he came to at Barcelona, young Pep, before he invented cargo pants with like crazy pocket placing, when he used to face Jose Mourinho on the regs in the Real Madrid-Barcelona epic rumble days, Pep was the force of good. Jose was the dark side. It is remarkable to watch Pep now at Manchester City, all the winning, all the controversy, probably the strain, the immense pressure, facing expectation and the media and all that. His heel turn has been remarkable to witness. It's been like watching Michael Corleone's art through the Godfather movies, starting as a pure hero and ending up being like, don't ever take sides of anyone against the family again, ever.
Yeah, I've got to admit, my main sense with Pep is it's just really not a very good look. That I get that he's won everything and he's reinvented the game, and his status is clear, and to an extent he must sometimes feel that he's being disrespected or overlooked, and he clearly has a rich variety of chips on his shoulder, just as we all do, Rog. But I do find he's not wearing his elder statesman garb very easily. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a sarcasm, there's a chippiness, there's a kind of sense of having quite a kind of acidic tongue that is slightly, it's just slightly unbecoming of someone who you kind of think of like that. I'm not sure Pep Guardiola is interested in winning friends. I don't think he cares about winning friends. Although he does seem to get very upset if anyone criticises him or says they don't like his football, which makes it sound a bit like he does quite want to make friends. But I just think mainly it just all seems so unnecessary. He's been asked a lot of fair questions by people who are doing jobs. None of it's kind of particularly outrageous. And he just seems to respond. His default response now seems to be sarcasm. And it's just yet another kind of example of how he doesn't really seem to be enjoying any of this anymore.
Yeah, every time I interview him, I do ask him a different variation of, do you actually enjoy any of this? And he answers, yes, in a way that makes you think he's not. But it's proof you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself chasing Arsenal quadruple while staying alive with your team on every single front, which we actually hear so little about. But it is unbelievably true. How many will City win of those 4 possible trophies?
Not the Premier League. Does Arsenal win that? Let's average it out and give them 1 domestic cup. Not sure which one. Obviously, they've got a decent chance of winning the Carabao. So 1 domestic cup and not the Champions League. So 1.
God, I'd bite your arm off for 1 as an Everton fan. Talking about bite your arm off, Port Vale 1, Sunderland 0. All hail Port Vale, an area, not a city, based in the town of Burslem, which is part of Stoke. In the middle of the country, often referred to as the mother town of Stoke-on-Trent, the heart of the classic industrial revolution pottery industry. I think every Briton knows that or thinks about this area as the potteries. The official tourist website proudly states we are the world capital of ceramics, even as that pottery industry has totally collapsed. It's a tough region. First time I went there, I parked the car. We're making a film about Stoke. The cameramen got out and started to unload, and a gang of 6 or 7 11-year-olds march calmly towards us. Each of them, as they got nearer, I saw they were carrying bricks in their hands, and then the big one at the back had a large 2x4 piece of lumber over his shoulder. And the thing that was so chilling was that they moved so slowly, like no one can stop us, no one can help you, which only added to their menace. That is.
What did they do?
Ultimately, what did they do?
Yeah. How did that story end? Don't leave me hanging.
I'm not too proud to admit this. We all ran really fast from a group of 11-year-olds who didn't pick up pace as we ran, because I think they always knew there could be another victim. And that's what was, it was very, very chilling. I'm not going to lie. I've never been in a zombie situ. It was as close to a zombie situ as I've ever been in.
It is a tough town, Stoke. Port Vale are actually quite a big historic name in English football, and they've got one of the strangest things about Port Vale is the size of their ground for the size of the club. It's an enormous stadium, given how kind of, and I say this with respect and love, how much of an afterthought they have been for quite so long. They haven't really troubled the scorers up at the top table for decades. They hold the record for the most seasons in English football. Right? 113 without ever reaching the first hit. So they've obviously never troubled the scorers in terms of actually being in the top flight, but they are a grand old name with a long history and an ardent, smallish but very dedicated fan base.
Yeah, their team, including Robbie Williams, bottom of the third tier, League One. But that didn't dent the day in an incredibly stylish anniversary kit. They welcomed the team 56 places above them in the pyramid, but on the lumpy field, you wouldn't have known it. Port Vale dogged, hungry, audacious. They had one shot on goal the whole game, and they made it count. 24th minute, New Zealander Ben Wade, a childhood Newcastle United fan, cleaned up some corner slot with a deftly executed floating header. It was really beautifully intelligent into the corner. Third goal of the FA Cup run for Wade. He'd also scored the only goal of the last round against Bristol City last Tuesday. Very delayed fourth round game. What 5 days that man has had. But nothing raw will have felt as good as the moment he celebrated scoring on Sunderland by unearthing the signature Geordie hero Alan Shearer goal celebration. It was just chef's kiss. Huh?
There's an element, you've got to know your audience. You've got to know why people are engaged with the story. There will have been an awful lot of Geordies watching that thinking, this would make the FA Cup fifth round a lot more entertaining than it was on Saturday night.
Fourth successive 1-0 home win for Port Vale. Big in Newcastle as well. In the FA Cup, they're into the quarterfinals. 1954, last time they got there. They've done it again, 72 years later. God bless, marooned at the bottom of League One. Suddenly feeling euphoric. 90 minutes away from a Wembley semi-final. I love life. I love football. I love the joy it brings. Leeds 3, Norwich 0. In the Daniel Farker present meets Daniel Farker past derby. The fire beast watched on. He's suspended, so he had to sit in the seats up high every time he was on the phone. He's probably the Premier League manager who looks most likely to be actually ordering a pizza and not giving tactical orders to his assistants. But it was a second string lineup, 9 changes. They still held Norwich at arm's length, took advantage of couple of moments of deeply unconvincing defending to reach the quarterfinals for the first time in 23 remarkable years. God bless Leeds. I'm really, really rooting for them. Finally, Fulham 0, Southampton 1. Old friends Southampton, currently 8th in the Championship, deserving winners. 91st minute penalty, but they've been resolute. They've been hungry. They played the counter really well. Fulham, strangely, almost dozed through this game. Huge pain and agony, really, for Fulham fans that I know. They know their team can be so whip smart in moments, so vicious. But oddly for Fulham, they can also feel so dead. And this was very, very odd. The wisdom for a lot of fans of Marco Silva making 9 changes to this starting lineup when this club are 12 points clear of relegation. They've never won a trophy ever. They had the chance to make an FA Cup quarter-final at home right here. Did Crystal Palace die for no reason, Rook?
Yeah, I've got to admit, I found it really annoying. I found if I was a Fulham fan, I'd be quite cross. Maybe with Silva, maybe with the players. Marco Silva, I think, has made it pretty clear he'd quite like to win a trophy, which doesn't explain.
Didn't look or feel like it.
No, which doesn't explain the changes. I'm conscious that we are kind of reverse engineering our opinions on this. Just Leeds made loads of changes and won, and therefore no one will criticise Daniel Farker. I guess the difference with Leeds is they are still they have a live relegation issue, and you can see why Farker doesn't want Dominic Calvert-Lewin, say, to pick up an injury in the FA Cup. That has to be their priority. Making changes for them is justifiable. For Fulham, they've got an outside shot of getting into Europe through the lead. That is possible. But at the same time, there is a pathway to the semi-finals for Fulham here. And not to take it just feels so... It's such a massive missed opportunity. Southampton aren't great. They also have other things to think about. And as you say, Fulham have never won a trophy. Palace showed you last season, and Newcastle to an extent as well, what it can mean to a club.
Maybe he's looking at Palace now. He said, "Lads, we do not want that. Future.
We don't want any of that." Maybe that is the logic, but
we don't want any of that pleasure then pain.
Marco Silva has decided that no highs means no lows, and he's happy just to sail on through. Yep. It is. I would be if I was a Fulham fan. I'd be really annoyed. I think it's a real shame that they didn't make more of a crack of it, given it was a good tie in the 5th round, spot in the quarterfinals, and all of a sudden. They've proved this season that they can live with some of the bigger teams. So why would you not think in a quarter or a semi we might be able to beat one of them?
Q, 1,000. Has Marco Silva given up on Fulham op-eds until the weekend? Okay, Everton took the weekend off from hurting my feelings. So let's go right into your mailbag in San Antonio. Raw, do the honours.
I don't know how to pronounce this first word, Roger, in a British accent.
Howdy. Yeah, it's not said often. It's A up in Texan.
It's not a greeting we use very often in Yorkshire, but I'll give it a go. Howdy from San Antonio, Texas, home of the best capitalised tacos, and in particular breakfast tacos, not Austin. That feels like an internal debate that I don't need to be part of. To be perfectly honest, I'm not getting involved in this argument. It's by the way, domestic dispute.
This is the Arsenal fans who've really made Raw back off criticising things.
It's truly a highlight of the week to listen. I'm really sorry, Connor. I can't do this in an American accent, so I'm going to change y'all to you all. Okay.
I can't do y'all either, by the way.
Let's not try and pull it off. Come on. It's truly a highlight of the week to listen to you all crown, then uncrown potential title winners, go inside the mind of managers, mostly Rossini, and give extra points to teams like Newcastle for nipping sacks and West Ham for throwing opposing players away like a Kleenex. What's nipping sacks?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to know, to be candid. No. Go on, keep going.
I'm 26 years an Arsenal fan after watching the infamous Golazzo by Thierry Henry in 2000 against United. It was the first game I'd ever watched, and at 10 years old, I had no team yet until I saw that. And I've been a gooner ever since. A confession that means something now that's rather different to what it used to. That same year brought me to the under-10 YMCA soccer fields, where boys become boys and dreams are about much else than soccer. One of my most clear memories of those early soccer days was shin guards. My dad, who knew nothing about soccer, went to the local academy and returned with guards that were the better part of my entire leg, including an ankle wrap so they didn't fall down. My first impression was, shin guards are to soccer what armour is to a tank. An absolute must-have if you want to keep your legs. The referee would come round and physically check to make sure everyone had them on and that they were big enough. Which brings me to my question. I watch every week and I've especially noticed the lack of shin guard presence, or grown men wearing something that looks like a folded piece of paper placed inside their sock. Kid-sized equipment. In some instances, I wonder if they're there at all. So are shin guards still required for professional footballers? I can't rest or watch in peace until there is clarity. Jokes. That's just because I'm one of those stressed, anxious, afraid to win Arsenal supporters. Much, much love, Connor.
Raw, I love a technical question, and as an Everton fan, for whom we got like the late Jack Grealish, Ilian Dye, Tyler Diblin, they barely wore a shin pad between them, the holy shinity. I do love this question. I think the rules, according to your International Football Association board, IFAB, are that players have to wear them but can choose any size, right? They make their own terrible decisions if they want to.
Yeah, you have to have something on. I always thought there were minimum requirements, but it would appear that there are not. So you just have to, you can wear whatever you like as long as you're wearing some sort of shin protection. I would question, Rio Ungamoa came off at Molineux on Friday night carrying a pair of shin pads that looked, tiny. They must have been a few centimetres at most, and I would question how much good they will do you. But this is very much...
He's very sensitive, but only in a very small area.
There's just got one part of my leg that breaks. The rest of it's made of steel. It's fine. Yeah, it's a trend that has caught on. Someone like Grealish may well have inspired it to a large extent. Because as anyone who's played football at any level knows, after a while you just get used to wearing shin pads. It doesn't really bother you. It doesn't impinge your movement in any way. It's just a shin pad. So I'm surprised that the players have gone down this route, but then They get involved with all sorts of strange fads. The cutting holes in the socks, for example, is another one.
The nose strips that they used to
and the nose strips that in the late 90s. So it might be that we have a period. Maybe it's like shorts. Like shorts sometimes get really long and then sometimes get really short and then sometimes sort of hover in the middle. Maybe we'll be back on massive oversized shin pads in 5 to 7 years' time.
Do you think so? Is everything comes in wave? Like boot cut jeans are now back in, like in 10 years. That's the only thing to cap this. 10 years' time, the only prediction we'll make is that players will wear enormous, clunky shin pads. They'll just come back in their fashion.
Just one shin pad across both legs.
Yeah, like Michael Elise of the future will just be like, I wear giant shin pads because they make me feel alive.
Boot cut shin pads.
It's amazing. The recent photo that went viral of it with a 17-year-old Brighton player, Harry Howell, celebrating with his 87-year-old teammate James Milner, and you could see Howell's tiny, like a little nipple on his kneecap, and Milner's big old kind of traditional massive shin guards, which looked like he borrowed them from a joust scene in the Night of the Seven Kingdoms Raw. One player has played forever, big shin pads. The other, I don't know, Harry Howell, I wish you a long career, but like there is some kind of correlation, many implied in that photo.
Is there a possibility that James Milner's shin pads are structural?
What, you mean that he takes off his legs and just
like the shin pads are holding him together?
I do love that idea. I'm just at this point. I've been playing so long, the shin pads have just like sealed to my. I don't know where. I don't know my flesh ends of my shin guard begins.
This is getting a little bit niche, but again, anyone who's ever played football of any level will know that shin pads, after a while, become deeply unhygienic things.
Oh my God!
James Milner's shin pads must smell weird.
I bet they smell like the rest of him, just of like damp moss on a fresh spring day, and just the smell of tenacity, perseverance and wonder. I do know it's correlated in all sincerity, Colin. I think to the end of the reducer tackle football used to be. We talked about how an FA Cup game final, was a famous one from the 70s between Leeds and Chelsea, was re-refereed by a modern referee, and he looked at it. He said, "I would have given 17 red cards and 27 yellows in that game." Not trying to be funny, but football used to be a game of knee-breaking tackles. They've been ruled out of the game mostly. I think these gents do feel an invulnerability. There is, though, in sports, Raw. You see in hockey, like the players not wanting to wear visors, or the NFL, the Guardian cap for helmets, which I know the science is a bit different on that. But for many, the look is the thing, the trend is the thing, what it projects, and there is like genuinely players do buy into that theory that it holds me back, it stops my pure speed.
Well, yeah, thanks to MIB team member Jacob. I did a story on net guards in the ice hockey at the Winter Olympics a few weeks ago. Because they've been made compulsory by the body that looks after international hockey, and a lot of the NHL players were slightly wary of wearing them because they don't have to in the NHL. I think they're grandfathering in the rule over the next couple of years. And watching the ice hockey at the Winter Olympics, a lot of them looked like they were wearing net guards, but they were wearing them as low as possible. Now, I don't know about you, Rog, but I'd quite like anything that prevents me getting a potentially fatal injury. But listening to players talk about it, they said, well, look, it's what we're used to. We're not used to wearing them, but also there is an element of kind of libertarian masculinity. Like I'm taking this risk. I don't want to, I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm happy without it. It's up to me to decide. And yeah, I think the footballers are maybe the same with shin pads, as they're the shin pads in Britain rather than shin guards. I just don't quite believe that there can be any real benefit to wearing tiny little ones. I don't wear shin pads to play now as a 43-year-old man, but I can't believe that professional players, the speed the tackles are going. You look at George Dobson's tackle for Wrexham, like a lot of the leg breakers have gone, but it's still a contact sport. It's still a physical sport, and you would want a little bit of protection at least.
It's so funny. The one time I did not wear shin pads in a game because I left them at home, I still have on my left leg 2 stud marks that will never leave my leg to this day. So I am very pro shin pad. The truth is, there is a correlation between injury and shin pad. If I were a Premier League player, I would wear them. If only to be like a little Luka Modric who takes the field with one shin pad, a photograph of himself playing for Croatia and winning the Champions League with Real Madrid. The other has a photograph of his wife and his kids, and he kisses that one before he steps onto the field. For that alone, Raw, take a picture of my dog Martin Scorsese onto the field with me before I make my debut at the Hill Dickinson. I'm going big.
I would not do that because that would feel a bit like I had a picture of my dog or wife or children on my shin pads and lots of my opponents would kick me and thereby kick their faces. I wouldn't like that at all. I would put pictures of my enemies on my shin pads.
People love dogs. They wouldn't get near me, baby. But before we zig off into the realm of complete fantasy, thanks for your letter, Connor. By the way, I'd love to come to your city. San Antonio and El Paso are the two places I long to go to in this nation. Keep writing to all of us here at menandblazers@gmail.com. Try and answer everything that comes in. By the way, James Milner's shinnies, death smell like, God, the beauty of old leather. Want to give huge thanks to Bank of America, official bank of US soccer, and the FIFA World Cup 2026 for supporting the Men in Blazers media network. Discover what's possible in sports and in life. What would you like the power to do? A quick reminder for listeners in Atlanta, we're heading down to you March 27th for our World Cup countdown show, 76 Days Out Live, presented by Bank of America, official bank of US soccer, and the FIFA World Cup 2026. Come and join us for an unforgettable night of football and joy and pints at the Eastern as we lean into the summer we've all been waiting for, the summer we all need, when the whole world arrives in the A for the best 39 days of our being. Tickets can be found at the link below. I'll be back post-Champions League games on Wednesday with the mighty James Horncastle. Come and join us live on YouTube. Raw, I'll rock it with you Friday. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
This is Rog saying let's not take a second of watching football together for granted, and courage.